What's up, everybody? Billy here, checking in and launching another episode of the Log Talk podcast brought to you by the one and only Pertinier Outdoors. And this is a very, very exciting time of year and something that all of us have been waiting for. You know, we've been talking, we've only been doing this podcast for about a month now, but as a group, we've been talking and focusing so much for the last year and a half, 2 years on these western hunts. But at the end of the day, what we all really, really look forward to is our whitetail season here in New York. And for many people, it's the same for them wherever it is that you call home. So this is the best 3 months of the year, and we all look so much forward to it. So it is finally here. A lot of excitement in the air, as there always is. And so on this episode, you're going to have just myself and my brother Jimmy, as we call him, Big Jim. He, if you are following along with us on Instagram, you will see that he was successful on harvesting a nice buck last week on Friday. So we had that first good cold front that came through, and Jimmy was able to capitalize. So him and I, we were planning on having just a 10 or 15 minute conversation, and I guess as we should start to expect, these conversations turn into much longer than that. So he and I talked for about 45 minutes to an hour, and kind of dove into some of the details of that, as well as jumping into a recap of my adventures from last weekend. So some fun stuff there, and hope that you all enjoy the conversation, and also learn a little bit from the mistakes that I make. I've had a pretty wild first month here, I guess, of hunting between Colorado and here, and I've had lots of opportunity and had game in front of me almost every day, and I just need to relax and make those shots happen and make them count. So I had another opportunity, as you will hear, at a doe, and this time of year, my mindset personally is start to get some meat in the freezer, and then once we get later into October, start hunkering down on trying to harvest a good buck. So for me, that's what my focus is, and with having that in my mind, you know, a doe out in front of me is no different than a beautiful buck standing in front of me. I get really excited, and I need to listen to what I'm saying right now and relax and try to make those things happen a little bit more calmly. So learn from that, I guess, is what I'm saying. And so get out there. But that's what it's all about. If you're not feeling that feeling, then you're not really. Maybe you shouldn't be out there. If you hunt, if you do anything that gets you excited, you'll know what I'm talking about. Just getting that blood pumping and that adrenaline rising is exactly why we do it. So hope you enjoy this podcast. It's just the two of us, and at the end we talk about a little segment we're going to start coming out with, and our game plan is to start launching that at the end of each week before the weekend. We're going to do our own little spin on an update for a local whitetail update. So I'll tease that and let you guys hear about what Jimmy and I are talking about doing. But if you are interested in participating in what we're going to be doing, just reach out to us on Instagram. It's Pertinier_outdoors. And we'd love to get some folks that are following along and listening, get you guys participating in what we're going to be doing on the podcast throughout the hunting season. So please do that. And I guess the last thing I want to touch on before we get going with this podcast is I was actually out mowing the yard tonight and listening to the hunting public. They've got a podcast of their own, and they're doing their public land challenge right now, or they might be done with it at this point. But listening to them, I think it's the second podcast of that series, and have some really, really good, experienced, successful hunters on that podcast. You know, just a round table and talking, and the conversation that they got into towards the end of the podcast is one that, you know, I think any of us could sit and talk about for hours upon hours, and I love their take on it, and, you know, talking about, you know, shooting the opinion or the appearance of everybody feeling like they have to shoot some giant monster buck or else you're not successful. And the way that they were discussing that, you know, it's just so refreshing to hear. And for everyone listening to this, I strongly encourage that you go check out the hunting public and what they're doing and the message that they have in their podcast. Just that one in particular, I enjoy all of their stuff, but that podcast in particular, it really hit home, and I think that's the message, exactly what we're trying to send here, is that, you know what, if that spike horn walks by and that thing trips your trigger today, more power to you. Make a good ethical shot and take that meat home to your family and have a good harvest. And if it's a 2-year-old, whatever it is, a doe, you're the one making that decision, and that's your trophy and that's your experience. So check it out. Hope you enjoy this podcast, and we'll be continuing to keep the content coming. So thank you for following along. Appreciate the feedback. Please pass it along, good, bad, or indifferent. If there's anything in particular you'd like to hear, or from people you'd like to hear from, let me know, and we'll definitely put that stuff together. So thank you, and enjoy.
This is our first attempt at a remote podcast where we've got two different people via cell phone, so we're giving this a whirl. The audio quality may not be the best, but we're trying to figure out a cheap and easy way to do this to get started. So Jimbo and I wanted to get together here and kind of recap real quick, high level, what happened over the weekend, and then also kind of talk about something we're going to be doing here moving forward and have some fun with it. So I guess first and foremost, Big Jim, congratulations on your buck.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are all very jealous that you were able to arrow a nice deer right off the bat, and now we're chasing you, so that's fun. But yeah, we had a pretty eventful weekend. I think most of us had a chance to get out. Actually, I can't say all of us because I know Dad didn't get out because he had some work responsibilities and not able to get out in the woods. But you were out quite a bit last week, right? You got 2 or 3 hunts in, right?
Yeah, I was no way I was going out on opening day. I know a lot of people did, and a lot of people got some nice bucks, but it was just too hot for me to get out there. So the second day there, we had a wicked cold front hit. It was raining all day long, and I had some time, so I ran out. The biggest thing I wanted to do was get my memory card out of my trail camera over on the farm next to my house, and I ended up sneaking in there, and I was just about to turn into the field, and I could see a doe feeding there, and she was only like 40 yards. So I just stood in the tall grass and waited, and next thing I know, there was another doe feeding, and I realized that wasn't going to work out to get in there, so I backed down the hedgerow to the south and found a spot that I could cross and stand in. The hedgerow was just cut down last year, and the undergrowth has got it about 6 feet all the way through, so it was nice to get in there and just kind of mat down a spot and do an observation sit on the field for the first hunt. So that's how the first hunt went, and then Thursday I didn't get in there, and Friday was more of the same, cool weather, and it was a nicer day. I got in there and got in my tree stand before the deer started moving, and I took my laptop with me because I was anxious to see what was on the camera, and with all the does that I saw on Wednesday night, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just whack a doe quick and get her gutted out and go to camp for the weekend. And I was looking through my trail cam pictures, and lo and behold, the last 3 pictures on it was probably the last 8 to 10 pictures on the camera were a really nice, probably 130-inch 9-point feeding on the acorns right around the base of my tree. And after I saw that, I was like, he can't be far, so I'm going to hold off on the does. And sure enough, I had does come out first, and they started feeding on the acorns and went out to the beans. And a little buck came from the west edge of the field, and he was feeding with them. And the doe ended up getting behind me and winding me. This was probably after about 45 minutes, and she took the little doe and the other buck and started heading to the west side of the woods. And I just happened to look down underneath to see where they were heading, and there was a 4th deer standing there. I pulled my binoculars up, and it was that big 9-point. And he turned and started to head out of the field with him. I thought for shits and giggles I'd just throw a soft grunt at him. And I grunted, and he stopped in his tracks and whipped his head around. He was looking over towards me, and he ended up turning around and feeding on some browse, and then probably like a 5 or 6 point came out of the corner and went out to the beans, and he beelined right for the beans to it, and he's probably about 100 yards down the edge of the beans, and he started feeding right at me, and then a decent little 8-point came out, and he V-lined right for that, and he was starting to square off, and he was closing pretty quick, and he was about 60 yards and coming right in, and I was already figuring out where I was going to put him on the wall. I thought it was a done deal, and the wind swirled, and they all caught me, and he turned and kind of trotted out of the field, and I got a little bit of video of that. And I was texting the other kid that was in there hunting, telling him what happened, and I was just standing there like, man, this is a really good first hunt. And I heard a branch snap, and I turned and looked 10 yards behind me in the woods, and that really nice 8-point, real wide. I think he was 18 and a half inches wide. He came right out of the woods behind me and right underneath the tree and quartered out into the field, and I shot him at about 10, 12 yards. So the hit was kind of high. I mean, it was a steep angle to begin with, but it was high in the back strap in front of the hind quarter, and I saw it go in, and it stuck. Like about the fletching was sticking out, and when he turned and ran down the field, I could see where the broadhead was sticking out, and it was definitely a hard quartered angle. But the broadhead was still about 3-4 inches behind the shoulder, probably 4 or 5 inches behind the shoulder. And all I could figure was gut. I mean, he ran 60, 70 yards to the edge of the field and just stood there. And it kind of looked hunch, like a gut shot would. And he stood there for about 10 minutes. And then he just kind of one step at a time into the hedgerow. Once he got even with me in the hedgerow, I couldn't see him any longer. And probably got about a half an hour to watch him before he disappeared on me. And I knew he didn't go anywhere, and I really didn't feel good about the shot, so I ended up backing out because we've done it before where we'll get down and start looking for blood, and next thing you know, you kick them up and they're running and you never find them. So I figured best thing to do would be to back out for the night, and that's what I did, and came back in the morning, and unfortunately it was a better shot than I thought. Coyote got to him a little bit. He was definitely dead. I probably could have gone back in at 10 o'clock at night and gotten him, but ended up not even hitting gut. There was no gut on the arrow. I went over it, and I didn't end up gutting him because of how much the coyotes got into him. I ended up just quartering out the front shoulders because they were untouched, and getting the back straps and neck meat, and got the head off him and tagged him up. And I got to believe it was mostly liver that I hit, so I must have got it pretty good because he bled pretty good. But seeing him on his feet half an hour, 45 minutes after I shot him didn't give me the warm and fuzzies to go track him. But you learn something new with every kill, you know?
Yep. So I guess a few things there that I'd like to dive into on your hunt and how you kind of set it up. So, and then I got a question for you from the very end of it. So I guess starting off with it, so I think Friday we had through in this area here, we're in the Western New York area, we had a pretty strong north wind, right? So how
yes, it was, it was straight out of the north.
Right. So what was your stand setup? Were you, because you're on farmland and you had some hedgerows there. So how were you set up? Where were the deer coming from? Were they coming from bedding downwind to you, from, upwind, downwind? How was that all set up?
So the setup is I got 40 acres to hunt there, and they ended up cutting down the hedgerow that ran in between the 40 acres and the other 85 acres. And I used to be right on that hedgerow on the top of the hill, right about where I sat in the hedgerow on Wednesday night. And after they cut that down, I didn't really have any options because the rest of the woods and the hedgerows are on the west side. But the back side, the north side of the 40 acres, is really the only block of woods there. And it's about, I would say it's probably like a 10-acre block of woods. And on the west side, it was all woods, but they logged that last year. And they clear-cut pretty much the whole thing. And it's kind of wetland to begin with. And that stuff that they logged, the undergrowth in there is unbelievable in the first year through it. But that's where a lot of them are bedding. But I also had a lot of deer coming out right underneath my tree. And luckily they were coming out on the west side of my tree. because if they came out on the east side of the tree, they would have been winding me. That's what happened with the doe. She got behind me on the east side of the tree, and then she was downwind.
Okay.
So I'm on the north end of the property.
Okay. And you got wood, you got field to your south, and you got woods to your north.
Yep. And then there's a very little bit of clear-cut woods, that's where the bedding area was last year for the most part, too, to the west, but now it's clear-cut and just a lot of undergrowth and tops, which is great. But I wasn't sure how that was going to be the first year after the cut, but turns out they're still laying in there, and they must not have been able to see me on the way in because I walked right down the east side of the field because the other kid was in there hunting. I didn't want to mess him up, so I just went for it, and that 9-point was laying right in there. I would have thought he would have been able to watch me walk in, but maybe that undergrowth is high enough where he just can't see the field.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I want to do with each one of, hopefully we all have quite a bit of success this year, and I think it's kind of cool to break down. I like some of I know the hunting public, they've been doing some hunt breakdowns, and I think it's really cool to dive into it and kind of play it back to, kind of see what the setup was to make all that come together and make it work. Because so many times I think we have success, we shoot something, but you don't really analyze and digest exactly what we did to make all that happen, because it probably wasn't just all luck that deer walked by. There was some thought that went into it. So that's cool to kind of hear that setup there, and it sounds like that piece of property is actually pretty good for a north wind or anything that's got north in it, from the sounds of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really set up there for the west wind because that's normally the predominant wind, and anything coming from bedding down the edge of the field, I'll be able to take it before it gets downwind. But the north wind actually played a pretty good role in that. So
yeah, it's cool.
But that property, what we do is we come in an access road on the 85-acre side. The other kid that hunts in there has permission to hunt all of it. And on the east side of the hedgerow, where the 85 acres is, it's all field. There's no woods. And there's an access road that runs up the middle of it. And it's just the best way to come in, so he's good with me parking in there. And really the ideal thing for me to do is go to the hedgerow that they clear cut, but that's overgrown like 6-7 foot, and just sneak down to the north end of that and cut in the hedgerow. And it's only about 60 yards in my stand from that, and I'm along the edge of the woods, so it's pretty good cover to get in there. But with him being in there, I didn't want to mess him up and walk right down the edge to him, so I just went for it and went across the field, and surprisingly it worked out. But
it's awesome. So I guess number 2 was the deer were not, my question / statement sounds like, and it's the same thing that I saw this weekend too. The deer just they're feeding like crazy, especially this weekend they were, and they're really hammering acorns right now. Seems like if you can hunt an area that's got acorns, that is absolutely the place to be. And you got some beans and stuff there too, but it really just seems like acorns, they're crushing there, right? I mean, that's what you witnessed. I know you and Adam were up in Naples this weekend, and you guys ran into the same thing up there too at camp.
Yeah. So the difference there is on this farm that I'm hunting, the only acorn trees are pretty much on the north edge of the property on that woods that I'm sitting on. And I think that's why it's working out so well for me there, because those are the only acorns and all the deer are coming to it. Because when I was out there on Wednesday night, I saw 12 deer, and every single one of them were heading for that woods to eat on acorns. So
nice. That's awesome.
You get up to camp, and it's a different ball game because there's freaking acorns everywhere.
Yeah.
So
it seems like you guys are there's a lot of trees producing acorns this year. It's not just.
I mean, it's like walking on marbles going through the woods. It's crazy.
Jesus, that's like a couple of years in a row. Last year wasn't. 2 years ago it was crazy like that. Last year there was kind of some spotty.
Last year it was
right?
like the whole back of the hill produced pretty good, but the rest of it didn't. And this year it's just everywhere. I mean, even the hickory nuts and everything are coming down. And it's a really good year for mass crop. So
at the farm out here, we don't have any acorn trees, but we got a bunch of hickory in the front of the woods. And on Sunday, I had 2 or 3 does, and it might have just been 2 does. It was a little bit hard to. The goldenrod's 5 feet tall, and I was assuming it was 3 deer, but it might have only been 2 that I was watching all morning. But I mean, they were inside of 30 yards, and I couldn't see them, but I could just hear them. You could just hear them just chomping on hickory nuts, and they fed till 9:30 in the morning. So they're just they were on their feet this weekend and just feeding them. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was wild.
So
I mean, so Saturday I didn't really hunt much because we did the recovery of my deer, and by the time we got to camp and we moved Adam's stand, and it's funny at camp because we call it the point. It's where the hill wraps around, just around into the valley. I used to hunt there, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago when I started archery hunting. And every good acorn year, that's like where everything started happening first. And we went in there and walked around and looked for a spot to put his stand. And it was like every tree you turned to had a rub on it. And there was little scrapes popping up all over and buck rubs all over, and just
it's probably one
on the ground
one
all over in there.
spike horn that's just tearing the whole area up.
I can tell you there's something bigger than a spike horn in there.
Yeah.
But if you go up on top of the hill, I mean, you're struggling to find a buck rub, and everything's still greened up there.
Right.
So it's like a totally different world just going up to the top of the hill than what's going on down on the point.
That's interesting. Has anybody talked to Corey? Is he getting pictures of bucks?
I have not talked to him yet.
I'll bet you he's got a pile of, because that's where they all seem to hang, is down low there, and then once season gets on and the rut kicks in.
That whole brush lot north of our cabin is just absolutely ripped up and scrapes everywhere. And on Friday when Adam was up there checking some of his cards, he went through like our middle meadow and stuff, and he said none of the scrapes were opened up. And Friday night while I was at home here, I got a cell camera in the middle meadow, and I had 3-4 bucks on camera, different smaller ones, nothing big. But when I went up there on Saturday, all those scrapes were opened up all the way around the meadow. There's one under every single licking branch. So
yeah,
that's typical up there. I mean, the little ones get fired up early. So
yep, don't they all? So I kind of wandered away from. So back to the deer you shot. So we talked a little bit, you and Dad and I, about, could we or could you have done something a little bit different, in trying to recover that deer? I mean, looking back at it, is there anything you take away from that you might have approached it a little bit differently, or it is what it is?
I mean, I think it's really tough because I didn't have the arrow. If I'd have had the arrow to be able to inspect the arrow and say, yeah, there's guts, or no, there's not guts, it probably would have gone a totally different direction. But seeing the angle of the arrow while you was running across the field, I was thinking mostly guts. But the pitch of the shot just put it right over the top of it, I guess. Just not something I expected. And we've had,
and
Adam
knows? I mean, he could have. Go ahead.
Adam shot a buck a couple of years ago at camp, and he knew he hit it back, and I went over there, and I almost don't think we had the arrow. Maybe we had the arrow and there's some guts on it, but there was blood right off the bat, and we started following it, and we went to where it ran off the log and rode into the woods, and there was a little blood, but we were like, you hit it back. It wasn't a great hit. Let's leave it. And then Uncle Mike came down the hill, and he was like, yeah, let's check the blood out. And we went a little bit further, and next thing you know, you hear him running through the woods. And we went back the next morning and could not find him. So, with this thing, I was right on the property line to begin with. I didn't want to push him. I knew he didn't go anywhere. I knew he was laying at the end of the hedgerow. So it kind of made it tough to want to go in there.
Yeah, you made the right decision.
Risk the shot of pushing him off. But one of those deals, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I think if we went back there at 10 o'clock at night, he'd have been dead. But too bad.
But he also could have been alive and could have pushed him off. So, I think you made the right. I think you made the right decision. And so, the last question I had there, so you mentioned that you were able to get as much meat off the deer as you could, and one thing I kind of wanted to hit on was, you did reach out to the local DEC officer and chatted with him about the scenario to see what was right or wrong for you to do. So I just want to talk about what that conversation was with him.
Yeah, I gave him a shout and just let him know what had happened and that I lost a bunch of meat to the coyotes. And he kind of hemmed and hawed, and he said normally due to a not so good shot or a questionable shot and lost to coyotes, they don't normally reissue tags. And I told him it's, for me, it's not even about the horns. Yes, I was trying to shoot a nice buck, but even if I could get a doe tag to replace the meat. But he was like, did you get your DMAP tags? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, why don't you just use them up? And I'm like, all right. But, for us, it's like we're going for 5-6 deer a year. I mean, I just spent one of those tags and probably only got, 15 pounds of meat out of it, or 10 or 15 pounds. So.
Right. Out of
said,
you shoot you fill your buck tag normally, you're getting 45 pounds or more, hopefully, meat out of that.
So
he
was nice
say?
about it. He said most of the time when they reissue tags, it's for something like an old wound or a car hit or an old gun wound from last year where all the meat's gangrene and you really can't do anything with it.
Right.
He said that's mostly what they're reissuing tags for. And I understand it. I was just trying to do the right thing and make sure we followed the right steps. And we'll go back for some more doe tags there on November 1st, and I don't have a problem filling the freezer with those. So.
Nope. It's a lot of fun.
Yes, it is.
So that's that. I guess I'll just quickly share my weekend hunt. So I was able to, Jimbo and I are a little bit different stage of our lives. He's able to just leave home and hunt all weekend. Depends on what you ask his wife, but pretty near indoors. But
you're making excuses already here, Bill.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of trying to lay the groundwork for why I'm not going to put up the numbers this year. So Friday night I ducked out, and there's some state land between where I work and home that I checked out a couple times. I know I only went there once last year, and I went there once during turkey season, so I don't have much experience there at all. But having a north wind, like I said, we had a pretty good north wind, and it was fairly cool on Friday. So we don't have too many stands set up around the farm here for a north wind, and the ones that we do, we try to let be until we get to the rut because they're typically pretty good when you can get a north wind. You get in there first or second time, you can get a pretty good hunt and some opportunities. So we kind of try to shy away from those until we get into the later part of October, beginning of November. So I figured what the hell, I would run over and check out this spot and just run in for a quick evening sit. And I did get a tethered saddle for this year, so I have a kind of a mobile setup that I wanted to get some time in and run up a couple trees and just get comfortable running that. Especially Jimmy and I messed around with it, practicing, and you use it on the bear hunt. But it is a lot different when you're carrying it. Go ahead.
It worked really well on the bear hunt. I mean, we sat for a few hours on end, and it was super comfortable.
Yeah. So, but what I did find when I went in Friday night is that it's much different. We were doing it just wearing the saddle and having the 3 sticks to go up a tree. But when you've got a backpack and all your gear and you got your bow and got to set up bow hangers in the tree, So that was a learning experience for me, both Friday night and Saturday morning. But so Friday night, I went out to this state land, and they do have some actual fields and ag that they do around there. It's a pretty popular area to pheasant hunt and do some upland bird stuff. So I assume that's why they do the farming there. So I went out and picked a spot, and I was just kind of running down a hedgerow, looking for some fresh sign just to set up and run up the tree for the last couple hours of daylight. And I came across a couple oak trees, and there was scat all over the ground. So I was like, well, I guess no sense in really pressing much further. I'll just find somewhere right in here. And that was kind of right on the edge of the field. So I got about 10 yards in from the edge of the field, near a couple of these big oak trees, and just ran up a tree. And it was quite the cluster. I mean, it took me like 40 minutes to get myself all set up, which it was totally shouldn't have been that way. But just like I said, carrying my backpack up the tree, and then I'm using for a platform, I'm actually using a tree seat, which is working awesome. I'm super happy with it. But
that was a good idea.
Yeah. So I think I've on Camel Fire, I bought 2 of these tree seats for $25 each. They're normally, I think, $45. They're the Hawk Hangout, I think, is what they are, and they're rock solid. It's got some rubber bushings on the seat, so the seat flips up and down, which is actually kind of nice for when you're transporting and carrying it around. But it's got some nylon bushings on it, so it's super quiet. I mean, it doesn't make any noise at all, and
nice.
And it's pretty sturdy. So anyway, that was kind of a cluster getting set up. So I can't seem to get my line the right height, and then I figuring out where my bow is going to go. It was a mess, and I didn't have a saw to prune the tree. So you could just envision me flopping around up in this tree, and I was only like maybe 15 feet off the ground. And I finally get my bow set up, and I spin the platform around the tree because I had a limb that was blocking me. So I spun around the tree, and I turn around, and there's 2 deer feeding out like 35 yards. They were under 40. I ranged them. There's 35 yards, and I'm like, holy shit, there's 2 deer right there. And it was 2 small bucks, and they fed around for a little while, and then they started to kind of head around to the south and started circling around, and naturally they got downwind of me as they were headed out to the field. And so they kind of, I know they smelled me. They kind of snorted a little bit and ran back off where they came from. So that hunt kind of ended that way. On my way out, I was about probably half a mile or 3/4 of a mile back into this piece, and I walked through all open field to get out there. And on my way back, it was dark, but it was light enough that I could look through my binoculars, and I was checking the field to see if there was anything out there as I was walking back, and there was a pile. It was 5 or more deer out feeding, and looked like good bodied deer. They were I was watching them walk around, and you could tell that they were pretty husky. So I'm thinking they had an opportunity or a chance of being bucks, and they might have just come right up out of, there's a creek bed that runs down through there, that they might have just popped out of been bedded down in there and came up to the field to feed on what was in there. That's not real nice crops. They're kind of, looks like it was a failed planting, whether it was because it was too wet this summer or this spring or what the deal was, and they just couldn't get in there. But they're eating whatever's out there. So I kind of looped back around and stayed low in the field where they couldn't see me down over there's a little bit of a crest in the hill in the field, and just stayed out of their sight and got to the truck and got the heck out of there. But so that's kind of the end of Friday night. And then Saturday morning, my buddy Brian and I, we went back, also known as Trigger. I guess everybody on here knows who he is. Him and I went to same state land, just a different parcel of it, and we both had our running gun setups. I'd never been to this spot. Brian had been, and he had a trail camera set up there during the summer, and he had a kind of an area he was wanting to go. So we get to the spot, and it's only like 100. It's under 100 acre piece of property with just one access point, and there's already a truck there that beat us to it. So we didn't know really where that guy was and, you know, how many people there were. We didn't want to bust them up. It was a beautiful morning. It was a little bit of a frost on the ground. It was crystal clear and cold. It was an awesome morning. So Brian and I walk in, and we go to the spot where he wants to cross the creek, and we had gotten all that rain last week, and this creek is like totally swollen, and it's got a beaver dam, so the thing's not moving. And whereas he was there 3 weeks ago, and it was, you know, you could walk across it in sneakers. So he's all, you just know how he is. He's freaking fired up, and he's pissed off, and, you know, the sun isn't even, it's just starting to come up, so it's starting to get that time where he needs to get up a tree and I need to get up a tree. And so I'm like, I'm going to walk away from this. I'm going to go find somewhere else to hunt, and you just figure out what you want to do right here. So he ended up running up a tree right there on the edge of the creek, and I was going to dip across. There's a cut path that I don't know if it's a DEC or I don't know who maintains it, but there's a cut path there in the grass. Well, it is grass on the trail, but so I dip across it. I was just going to go right across, maybe 100 yards from him, and set up. Him and I have a lot of luck hunting close to each other. For whatever reason, we like to, you know, hunt within 100 yards. And so I dipped across, and there wasn't a freaking straight tree to be found, relatively straight anywhere. It's all like, it was like weeping willows and, you know, big swamp style trees. There's nothing to get into. And so the sun's up. It's like 7:15, and I'm freaking walking around. I'm like, this is ridiculous. But I was kind of frustrated, but in the same breath, I'm like, well, let's just wander around and check this place out. I've never been here before. It could be an interesting piece of property. There's some like alfalfa fields out in front that are on the state land that were freaking beautiful and lush. So I'm like, they must be eating out there, and coming back in, it's just this low, it's in the bottom of a valley, and it's all swampy, and so there's cattail marsh, and, you know, some you know, there's a little pond with some willows around it on both sides, kind of little like dry willow bedding areas with swamp around them. So I stomped through the swamp and, you know, walking in water up to my ankles. I was pretty happy. I was wearing my Gore-Tex, you know, Western hunting boots with my gaiters. So I was able to stay dry, but I pounded through there and got over into the next patch of big willow trees where it was a little bit more like firm ground and grassy inside of there, and was just trying to look for some sign. And I ended up coming across some sign, maybe 300-400 yards around through these willows, and came up on a couple apple trees that there wasn't an apple left anywhere. The ground was just mud from all the deer tracks, and found a couple rubs in there. So I decided to find a straight tree I could run up and sit for a couple hours. And so I did, and I went up the tree, and it went much smoother than my operation did on Friday night. And I got up and got set up, and I was up in the tree for 20 minutes, and right from the direction I came from in that swamp, I just hear this just thrashing and crashing coming through the swamp, and I'm like, I'm all wound up. I grab my bow, I turn around, I'm watching, and out pops this, you know, 60-pound yipper, and just breathing heavy, and then out comes another doe right behind her, and then a spike horn. So I don't know if the spike horn was chasing them, or if it was just the three of them having a party in the, you know, 9-foot cattails. I don't know what was going on there, but they pop out, and they're all wound up. And of course, just the wind was super variable, and it spun around. I felt it on the back of my neck, and the doe smelled me, so she snorted like 10 times, stomping, and then she turns and runs back into the swamp. And I'm like, well, sweet that I seen something, but I'm like, of course, you know, like you come out, and of course the wind's going to spin and hit the back of my neck. So fast forward 15 or 20 minutes later, same thing happens, coming from the other side of me, and I had a really nice doe come out with a fawn, and that doe there's another mowed path there. She hit that mowed path, and she came out at 35 yards, and she covered 15, 20 yards in like no time. Next thing I know, she's almost right underneath me, probably under 10 yards, and there's a tree leaning out in front. So I'm trying to bring my bow, and this is where I'm trying to learn how to hunt from the saddle, and it's a big difference. So I had my bow on the right side of the tree, and she was on the left side. So I've got my bow, and I'm trying to bring it around, and you got your tether line coming down, and then on your tether line on the tree, or whatever you call the rope that goes around the tree, you've got the tag end. And the tag end was just dangling down. It got caught up in the limb of my bow. So I'm trying to, and she's like under 10 yards. And at that point, the wind starts swirling again. I can feel the wind hitting the side of my face, and then I feel on the back of my neck. So I'm trying to, she's looking up, but I've got a tree limb in front of me with some leaves on it. So I'm trying to get that tether line out of my bow without moving too much to catch her attention. And then she ended up, I don't know if she's seen me move or if she did smell me. I don't know. She never snorted, but she turned and they went right back where they came from and ran off. So I was pretty happy. I mean, for essentially a blown morning, without a plan, to get up in a tree, and within just being in a tree for an hour, I had 5 deer inside of 40 yards. I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
No, and especially in 2 areas that I've never, including the 2 deer I saw on the stand on Friday night. It was fun. It was good to see deer, and in a couple of spots I'd never been before, just to, get into, I guess, a good area. And obviously there's deer there, so that's a good sign. And then Sunday I had a big doe. I was hunting at the farm, and had a big doe come out. We're on doe patrol right now. It's typically the crew and my guys I hunt with out here, it's what we're after this time of year, is just getting out and focusing on shooting a couple does and getting the confidence down. And had a big doe come out, and she stood for 30 minutes just analyzing, and the wind was swirling like crazy on Sunday, and she's sitting there, and I'm just watching her, and she's big, and I'm watching, and we do a doe contest, for the biggest doe, and I'm just sitting there thinking the whole time, like, that's my contest winner right there. I'm watching her. She's turning her head, and she's got that big, long, narrow face. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a contest winner right there. And so she finally, after like a half an hour standing there, decided that she was gonna head for the woods, which was between where she was and where I am. And I was on the edge of the woods. And she comes across, and she hits there's a mowed path there again, and she hits that path, and she stops, and she's pretty much broadside, but quartering a little bit too, but she's broadside, and had a good clear shot at her. And with my setup, I'm running a fixed blade broadhead. I've got an iron will broadhead and a pretty heavy arrow, so pretty confident that even if I got to tuck it into the shoulder, I'm gonna blow through that. And she was switched right on. I was full draw, 30 yards, and the thoughts going through my head that she hit the trail, and she kind of was looking like she might come down the trail to me, but I don't know if she's gonna or not. So that split-second decision of, well, my pin's on her, I might as well pull the trigger. And sure as shit, I pull the trigger, and she drops like 8 inches a foot, and that arrow was perfect going right for her, and then she just dropped right out of the way, and she was gone and out of my dreams. And then we ended up having, I think it was the yipper she was with, bedded 8 yards from the bottom of my tree. And so when Brian left his tree stand, he was coming over to meet me at my stand, and I'm giving him hand signals, and I'm like, there's a deer bedded right there. And his eyes light up, so he knocks an arrow, and he comes like crouching around, because it's all tall goldenrod, so he's like crouching around, and he comes all the way over to my tree, and we were freaking having a riot. And it dawned on me once Brian got upwind of this thing, and the deer is straight downwind of Brian, and this thing is not moving, doesn't seem concerned. It's like starting to turn in my head that I'm like, this is definitely a yipper. Like, I wasn't sure looking at it in the binoculars, because it was, they always look bigger than what they are, especially when they're by themselves. And so he ended up sneaking into 6 yards on this thing, and he goes, meh. And the thing just stands up, and it's like, where the hell did you come from? And it took off, and it ran right back underneath me, and I come full draw on it, and it stops, and it's right below me, like 5 yards below me, angled away, and I see the spots on its back, and I'm like, no, I can't do that. I'm like, it'd be a fun story, but it's too early to be doing that. So
hard to shoot them on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was a fun weekend. It's good to be back out chasing whitetails, and I think it's going to be a good year. There's a lot of really good food on the ground. There's a lot of good deer running around, it looks like. So, and I think it's going to be a good year.
So what did you do differently on your second tethered setup than your first one that made it that much easier?
Well, it might sound silly or simple, but I actually the biggest thing that I did was I left my backpack on the ground, and I've got the Hawk Helium climbing sticks, and so I'm running 3 of them, and they've got the little suction cup deals where you can attach the sticks to each other. So what I did was I put the first stick on, and I'm trying to think if I put the second stick up. Yeah. No, I have the first stick on, and then I got the 2 stuck together, and then I put the one that's closest to my body. I wrap that line that goes around the tree, the rope that goes on around the tree. I wrap that around my neck, and I dangle that down my left side, and then I actually took the platform, which is the tree seat. I took that, and I did the same thing with that, looped it around itself, made the loop, connected it, but I just made it bigger than the tree, and I looped that around and put it down my right side. So I was able to just walk right up the tree, and so I was able to get up the tree in 10 minutes and down the tree in 10 minutes. And that was significantly quicker. I didn't make hardly any noise. And, what I'm finding is that, especially right now with all the leaves on, is that you got to try to find a tree that doesn't have any limbs on it. It's almost like running a climber. Whereas I think if you get later into the fall when you don't have the leaves on, you can get away with, getting a nice tree that's got some limbs on it where you might be able to use some of the limbs as steps. But right now, the foliage is so heavy that unless you want to be up there with a freaking chainsaw every time you go up the tree, you might as well find something straight. And, with using that tether, you can put the tree between you and the animals, and you can really kind of get yourself out of the way of needing to have a tree with tons of cover on it. So.
Yeah, I mean, when we were in the Adirondacks and I was using that tethered system, I actually took a really old aluminum tree stand, and the thing weighs like 4 or 5 pounds. It really doesn't have much of a seat, just straps. But because of how light it was and I didn't have a platform, I took that with me. And then Adam carried my portable that I bought last year from XOP. He took that one, and it was really nice with 2 people because I hung the first stick, took the second stick with me. On the third stick, he just tossed it up to me. And then I got up to where we wanted to be, and I had a rope on me, and he hooked the portable on, and I dragged it up, hung it, dragged the other one up, hung it. And then I got up there and screwed some bow hooks in and trimmed a couple of limbs off. And we just shuttled everything up the tree, our packs and everything. So it was super easy when I used it with 2 people. But by yourself, there's a lot more coordination to figure out how you're going to not make trips up and down the tree.
Right. I don't know why I just had this image of 2 people using one climber and, tandem climbing the tree with one climber. I don't know why I just thought about that, but
we did that last year.
That would be. Don't admit that. Did you?
Oh, dude.
How'd you do it? Nuts to butts, or how'd you do it?
No, we did it. So I took the climber and I went up the tree, and then I pulled my portable up, set my portable, got in my portable, and I sent the climber back down to him.
Oh. Okay, so that's not. I'm talking about like two people in one climber.
It wasn't
like
that
two people,
two
one
guys,
climber.
one climber deal. Not
two guys, one climber. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it wasn't one of those.
Yeah.
But it did work pretty well.
Stinks.
Yeah. So there is multiple different ways you can do things out there.
There is. You can do a lot of different stuff.
But I will give you a little tidbit on using that portable with that tethered.
Yeah.
It works absolutely perfect if you face the stand the opposite direction where you want to watch and fold that seat down and just barely let that tethered down till you're barely touching the seat, and it gives you just a perfect spot to sit. You know, your weight's not all on the seat, but it's not all on the tether either. And just moving, an inch at a time on your line will give you different pressures for sitting and gives certain parts of you a rest if you're sitting for a long time. So that was actually really comfortable.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I definitely going to try some different stuff out, and I think I might even be using that tether even on my, pre-hung portable setups, just because I feel so safe with it on. You feel just rock solid up in the tree, and I really loved climbing the tree wearing that, and using the climbing belt, like lineman's belt, whatever you want to call it. Like it just, you felt so secure climbing up the tree. Whereas, when you're using, it's kind of terrifying when you think about it. We got to do a better job we have a ton of portables set up with climbing sticks that we haven't done anything with the sticks in years. And, it's really something that's got to be looked at. I got a stand I went up on Sunday that I put that stand up, and that thing's got the same ratchet straps on it did, going on 3 years ago. And, it's kind of scary.
I think when you're using like the climbing ladders, the one-piece stick,
right.
Or if you're using even the climbing sticks, the individual 3-step ones, they set so hard as soon as you step on them and give them a pull down and give them a little hop on the first step. I mean, they're freaking locked in. But I've found using
they're locked in, but if that strap gets dry rotted on you,
but
what good is it if it's locked in?
One piece climbing stick there. I've found like the second, third year is where they're really sturdy. But I definitely wouldn't, depending on what tree you're on, if the thing's done growing or if you can tell it's still growing year to year, it's good to every couple of years loosen them up and let the straps rest out and tighten them back down before season. But I can say, I was at camp on Saturday night and Sunday hunting, and the tethered was cool, and it works great for running gun stuff. But I gotta say, just having your muddy tree harness on and hopping up there and clipping into your safety harness, it's a lot. I think it's nicer to not have the tethered rope and the bridge belt and everything hanging out in front of you and trying to have to swing around. And I'm just as comfortable with my muddy harness on, just walking up and clipping into my tree strap up there. And most of all my stuff now is climbing sticks. Back in the day, we would have a lot of screw-in steps and using limbs, and you're dancing around on the way up and sketchy getting into your tree stand. But now I'm mostly using climbing sticks, and it's pretty safe. I mean, the only problem you're going to have is if you have a problem with your strap. But
yeah, it's just one of those things to keep in the back of your mind for sure. Checking that stuff and being aware when you're climbing up if you hear something squeaking or something seems loose or what your strap looks like. It's just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
So, all right, we should start wrapping this conversation up. It's been almost an hour. I was planning on talking for 10 minutes, and here we are, put together a full-length episode.
We didn't even talk about the upcoming, what we're talking about doing.
Well, that's what we're going to do right now. So, those of you that following along, with our social media pages, primarily Instagram, just about everything's going on there, and then we share what we can to Facebook. But what we're going to be trying to do, a couple things during the season is we're going to try to do some quote-unquote live log talks. So when we do have success and somebody gets something, we're going to try to record some video, just real simple, just explaining what happened and how the hunt came together. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Make sure you're following us. I don't think we'll do, if we have something cool that we want to, we might, you might go live on Instagram, but for the most part, we'll record those videos and then post them up on our stories for everybody to follow along with. So, Jimmy and Adam both had success this weekend, so we got a little bit of video of both those guys, explaining what they did and what happened with both of their harvests. And so the other thing that we wanted to let everyone know about that Jimmy and I will be starting to put together here, and we're going to try to do this weekly segment. So what it's going to be called, and we got to give credit where credit is due. We were trying to come up with a creative name, wanted to do some kind of a rut update about what's going on here for us local, up here in the Northeast, but primarily New York, which is where really all of us are, my family and, Jimbo, obviously my brother, and we really care about what's going on here. And I think there's a lot of people that also are interested in what's going on around home. So I guess I'll let you talk a little bit about what it's going to be called, Jim, and what the game plan is on how we're going to approach this on a week to week.
Yeah, I think, me and you had talked a while back, and we were trying to come up with a name for it, and we batted around a bunch of stuff and never really hit on anything that struck to us. And when we were on the way up to our annual bear hunt, me and Adam were in different vehicles, and he had called me, and we were shooting the shit on the phone. And I told him what we were thinking about doing. And the first thing he said was, he's like, "You guys use feeding them all the time." He goes, "Why don't you do a little hashtag breeding them?" And I was like, "That's perfect." I'm like, right away, I was like,
yeah,
hit.
Fantastic.
I'm like,
yeah, when you told me that, I'm like, that's it. That's freaking it.
Yep. Using it.
Yep. So we're going to do.
Credit goes to Adam on that one.
Exactly. So that's, sometimes you get so locked in, you just can't think creatively. So yeah, we're going to do a weekly segment called Breeding Them. And what we're going to do is we'll phone a bunch of different people around New York State, and maybe the guys that I hunt with, we do some stuff down in Pennsylvania, so I might get a couple people down there to call into and get some updates on what they're seeing down there. But the idea being just to kind of get a deer activity report. Obviously, most of us are interested in what the rutting activity is, but right now a big thing is what are the deer feeding on? Where are they at? Are they moving morning and night where you are? What are you seeing? And, we do quite a bit with trail cameras, don't check them a ton during the season just to try to not overwhelm and look at disturb the area too much. But Jimmy and I both got cell phone cameras this year. So those are kind of cool because we can really stay on top of what's going on very currently. So hopefully I got some people that I know that are running some cell cams too. So we'll tap into those individuals as well. So that's something to be keeping a lookout for. We'll probably be post our first, they'll be shorter episodes, maybe 10 to probably 30 minutes long. Those episodes we'll probably try to post them. I think we should shoot for like Thursday or Friday so that, post it by like Friday morning so that folks can listen to that prior to going out for the weekend. And get some updates, maybe with some folks that have been out hunting or have cell phone cameras to kind of get an idea of what's been going on during the work week prior to, getting your chance to get out there Saturday and Sunday to get after them. So that is what's next.
Our primary group is, here around the south of Rochester area, and yours is more out towards Buffalo. So it'd be cool to get some different people from different parts of the state, if they're following us and they're interested in doing it, send us a message and let us know, and we can try to get you on and just see if we can get a good report from all around the state and keep people updated with what's going on and see where the movement is and what they've seen things doing in their neck of the woods, and just try to go from there.
Yeah, it's exactly what we're looking to do. So I think it'll be fun. It'll be educational for sure, and definitely get some more people involved. It's fun to do that with this group, and it's definitely growing, and it's fun to see that. So
yeah.
Well, that's all I got, Jim. And
well, one
Dan,
of these days you'll be able to do a log talk about killing something, but we'll have to just wait for that day.
Yeah, I specialize in log talks about almost hurting or killing something. So one of these days, Jim, the champ will rise again. Just remember that.
Yeah. Just remember how many years you've been champ compared to me.
It don't matter. I'm the champ right now.
I got a few tricks up my sleeve.
We gotta wrap this up. I'm getting I'm getting the look, you know.
Oh, I'm getting the.
All right, buddy.
So yeah, we should probably.
Yeah, we're both in the same boat. They're probably texting each other. Is probably what's going on. Talking about how stupid we are.
Probably talking about Pertnier indoors or something.
Yeah, they should probably Pertnier do that. See ya. Feed 'em.
Feed 'em.
See ya.